In the weeks following Curtis's firing, Jake waited for the other shoe to drop. He expected backlash, expected problems, expected the community to turn against them. Some of that happened. There were whispers in town, a few sideways looks, and one particularly uncomfortable encounter at the feed store where an older rancher made his disapproval clear without saying anything directly. But there was also unexpected support. The owner of the diner in town, a woman named Margaret who'd known Ruth for decades, made a point of treating Jake and Will exactly the same as she always had, and gave a sharp tongue-lashing to a customer who made a snide comment in their hearing. The veterinarian who serviced the ranch, Dr. Sarah Chen, told them privately that her own sister was gay and she was glad to see them living openly. Tom Brightwater, in his quiet way, became a fierce ally. When some of the temporary hands from a neighboring ranch made comments during a joint branding operation, Tom shut them down with a combination of dignity and implied threat that left no room for argument. "You're good people," he told Jake later, "and on the Crow Reservation we have a long tradition of honoring Two-Spirit people. Not everyone understands that here, but I do. You've got my respect and my protection for what it's worth." "It's worth a lot," Jake said, deeply moved. Slowly, Jake began to relax into his new reality. He and Will stopped hiding their relationship, though they were still careful about public displays of affection, not out of shame, but out of a practical understanding that not everyone was ready for that. They held hands when they thought no one was watching, and kissed when they were alone, and gradually Jake learned to exist without the constant fear that had been his companion for so long. They threw themselves into building their partnership at the ranch. The horse training program got off the ground in June, and word spread quickly that the Double R was producing quality cutting horses. They had more business than they could handle within the first month, and had to hire an additional hand just to keep up. Ruth watched their success with obvious pride. Her health was declining. She'd been diagnosed with a heart condition and had to cut back on the physical demands of ranch work, but she was content knowing the ranch was in good hands. "You boys are doing even better than I hoped," she said one evening in July when she'd invited them to dinner at the main house. "This place is thriving, and it's because of you." "It's because of what you built," Will said. "We're just continuing your legacy." "You're building your own legacy," Ruth corrected, "and I couldn't be happier about it. Speaking of which, there's something I want to discuss with you." She pulled out a folder, another folder, Jake thought with a mixture of amusement and apprehension, and opened it to reveal legal documents. "I've updated my will," Ruth said. "When I die, the ranch goes to you too. The full remaining 80% ownership, split equally between you. I've also set up a life insurance policy to cover the estate taxes, so you won't have to sell anything to pay them. This place will be yours completely and legally." Jake felt overwhelmed. "Ruth, that's my choice," she said firmly. "I have no children, no other family I'm close to. You two are my family now, and this ranch is my legacy. I want it in your hands where I know it'll be loved and cared for." They talked for hours that night about the future, about Ruth's wishes for the ranch, about their own dreams and plans. It was bittersweet, a recognition of Ruth's mortality mixed with excitement about the future, but it felt right. As summer gave way to fall, Jake found himself happier than he'd ever been. He had a home, a partner, meaningful work, and a community that mostly accepted him. There were still challenges, still people who disapproved, still moments of anxiety, but they were manageable now, not overwhelming. He and Will settled into domesticity with surprising ease. They cooked together, cleaned together, made decisions together. They fought occasionally, usually about small things, but they always talked it through and made up. They supported each other through hard days and celebrated victories together. In September, on the anniversary of Jake first arriving at the Double R, Will proposed. They were on horseback, checking the fence line in the high pasture. The aspens were turning gold and the air was crisp and clean. Will reined in his horse at a spot that overlooked the entire ranch, the buildings, the pastures, the mountains in the distance. "This is where I knew," he said. "Knew what?" Jake asked, pulling Copper up beside Will's horse. "That I loved you, that I wanted to spend my life with you." Will reached into his jacket and pulled out a small box. "I brought you here that first day to show you the ranch, and I looked at you looking at all this, and I knew you were special. I knew we could build something together. I knew I was going to do everything in my power to make you stay." He opened the box, revealing two simple silver bands. "Jake Thornton, will you marry me? Will you let me be your partner in every sense of the word for the rest of our lives?" Jake felt tears streaming down his face. A year ago, he would have said no, would have run, would have protected himself from this kind of vulnerability. But he'd learned to be brave, learned to reach for happiness, learned that he deserved love. "Yes," he said. "Yes, absolutely yes." They dismounted, and Will slipped one of the rings onto Jake's finger, then let Jake put the other on his. They kissed there on the hilltop, with the whole ranch spread out below them and the whole future stretching ahead. "We can't legally marry in Montana," Will said. "Not yet anyway, but I don't care about legal documents. I care about commitment, about choosing each other every day. This is my promise to you, Jake, for better or worse, in sickness and health, until death do us part." "And my promise to you," Jake said. "I choose you, Will Cameron, today and every day. You're my home, my heart, my everything." They held each other as the sun set, turning the sky shades of pink and gold, and Jake felt a peace he'd never thought possible. He'd spent so many years running, so many years alone, and now he had this: love and home and a future full of promise. Winter came again, and with it another Christmas. This one was different from the last. Jake wasn't lonely, wasn't isolated, wasn't hiding. He was engaged to the man he loved, part owner of a thriving ranch, surrounded by people who cared about him. Ruth's annual Christmas Eve dinner was even bigger than the previous year. She invited neighbors, friends from town, and all the ranch hands and their families. The house was full of laughter and warmth, and Jake found himself actually enjoying the social gathering. "Look at you," Will teased, catching him smiling at something Tom's wife had said. "Almost like you're a real human being capable of social interaction." "Shut up," Jake said, but he was still smiling. "I'm working on it." "You're doing great." Will's hand found his under the table, and they laced their fingers together briefly before letting go. "I'm proud of you." After dinner, Ruth asked for everyone's attention. She stood at the head of the table, looking frail but happy, and raised her glass. "I want to make a toast," she said. "Last year at this time, I was worried about the future of this ranch. I wasn't sure what would happen to it when I was gone, wasn't sure I'd find the right people to carry on what I'd built. Then Will showed up looking for a fresh start, and Jake took a chance on staying instead of drifting on. Together, they've not only met my hopes, they've exceeded them." She smiled at them both. "Will, Jake, you've brought new life to this old ranch. You've built something beautiful together, both professionally and personally. You've shown courage and integrity, and you've helped create a community here where people are valued for who they are, not judged for who they love. I'm honored to call you family, and I'm excited to see what the future holds for you." Everyone raised their glasses, and Jake felt his throat tighten with emotion. A year ago, he'd been alone and lonely, convinced he didn't deserve happiness. Now he was surrounded by family, chosen family, the best kind, and engaged to a man who loved him completely. After the party wound down, Jake and Will walked back to their cabin. They'd stopped calling it the foreman's cabin months ago, started thinking of it as theirs. It was snowing lightly, and the world was quiet and peaceful. "Last Christmas, you saved me," Jake said as they walked hand in hand. "I didn't know how badly I needed saving until you showed up and saw me, really saw me. You gave me permission to stop running, to believe I could have a real life." "You saved yourself," Will said. "I just held out a hand. You're the one who chose to take it." They reached the cabin and went inside, shedding their coats and boots. Will built up the fire while Jake made hot chocolate, and they settled on the couch together, wrapped in blankets. "What do you think next Christmas will be like?" Jake asked. "Hopefully much the same, maybe a little more settled, maybe with some improvements to the ranch we've been talking about." Will kissed Jake's temple. "Definitely with us even more in love than we are now, if that's possible." "I don't know if it's possible to love you more than I do right now," Jake said, "but I'm willing to try." They made love that night with a tenderness that spoke of deep commitment, of promises made and kept. Afterward, lying in each other's arms, Jake thought about the journey that had brought him here, all the years of running and hiding, all the loneliness and fear, all the times he'd convinced himself he didn't deserve happiness. A lonely cowboy's Christmas had indeed taken an unexpected turn, and his heart was changed forever. But it wasn't just one Christmas that had changed him. It was choosing to stay, choosing to be brave, choosing to love and be loved in return. The spring after Will's proposal brought renewal to the land and to Jake's heart. They decided to have a commitment ceremony in May, when the wildflowers bloomed across the high pastures and the weather was perfect. Montana law might not recognize their marriage, but they didn't need legal recognition to make their promises real. Ruth insisted on hosting the ceremony at the ranch, in the meadow near the creek where cottonwoods provided natural shade. It would be a small gathering, close friends, ranch hands, a few neighbors who'd proven themselves allies, but it would be theirs. Jake threw himself into the preparations with surprising enthusiasm. He'd never imagined himself as someone who'd care about wedding details, but found himself having strong opinions about everything from the menu to the music, to exactly where they'd stand during the ceremony. Will teased him about becoming a bridezilla, but Jake could see the happiness in his eyes. "I never thought I'd have this," Jake admitted one evening as they discussed the guest list. "A real wedding with people celebrating us. It feels like a dream." "It's real," Will assured him. "We're making it real. And Jake, I want you to know, even if every person we invited declined to come, even if it was just you and me and someone to officiate, I'd still be the happiest man alive, because I get to marry you." "Who's going to officiate anyway?" Jake asked. "We can't exactly ask the local preacher." "I've been thinking about that. What if we asked Tom? He's a respected elder in his community, and he's performed marriages before. I think he'd be honored if we asked." It was a perfect solution, and when they approached Tom, his weathered face broke into a wide smile. "I would be honored," he said. "In my tradition, love is sacred regardless of the form it takes. I'll perform your ceremony with pride." As the wedding date approached, Jake found himself getting emotional at unexpected moments. He'd be working with a horse or mending fence, and suddenly he'd be overwhelmed by gratitude for the life he'd built. He had a home. He had love. He had a future. After so many years of having none of those things, their presence felt miraculous. Ruth's health had stabilized somewhat, and she insisted on helping with the preparations despite her limitations. She arranged for catering from Margaret's diner, ordered flowers from the florist in town, and even bought new clothes for the occasion. "You boys only get one first wedding," she said when they protested the expense. "Let me do this. Let me celebrate you properly." The night before the ceremony, Will stayed at the main house with Ruth, a nod to tradition, even if an unconventional one. Jake spent the evening in their cabin alone, feeling nervous and excited in equal measure. Tom stopped by around sunset, carrying a bundle wrapped in cloth. "Thought you might want some company," he said, "and I brought you something." He unwrapped the bundle to reveal a beautiful bolo tie, the clasp made of silver and turquoise in an intricate pattern. "This belonged to my grandfather," Tom said. "He was a man who understood what it meant to live with integrity, even when it was hard. He would have respected what you and Will are doing tomorrow, choosing each other openly, regardless of what others might think. I'd be honored if you'd wear this during the ceremony." Jake took the bolo tie with trembling hands. Tom, this is too much. It's a family heirloom. And your family, Tom said simply. You and Will both. Family isn't just about blood, it's about the bonds we choose. You've chosen each other, and you've been chosen by Ruth and by all of us who work this ranch. This tie should be worn by someone who understands honor and commitment. That's you. They sat on the porch and talked as the stars came out, and Tom shared stories of his own marriage, now 40 years strong. He spoke about the challenges they'd faced, the joys they'd shared, and the importance of choosing your partner every day, not just on the wedding day. Marriage isn't always easy, Tom said. There will be hard times ahead, illness, financial strain, disagreements, all the challenges life throws at people. But if you remember why you chose each other, if you keep choosing each other even when it's hard, you'll make it through anything. I will, Jake promised. I'll choose him every day. I'll be the partner he deserves. That's all anyone can ask, Tom said. Jake slept fitfully that night, waking several times to check the clock. When dawn finally came, he was up immediately, nervous energy driving him through his morning routine. He showered, shaved carefully, and dressed in the new clothes Ruth had bought him, dark jeans, a crisp white shirt, a leather vest, and boots polished to a high shine. He added Tom's bolo tie and looked at himself in the mirror. The man staring back at him looked different from the lonely drifter who'd ridden into the Double R a year and a half ago. This man looked settled, confident, loved. This man looked like he belonged. Ruth had arranged for the ceremony to begin at 11, giving the morning coolness time to warm into pleasant spring weather. Jake walked to the meadow with Danny, who'd volunteered to be his best man. The space had been transformed, hay bales arranged for seating, wildflowers in mason jars, a simple arch made of branches decorated with ribbons. The guests were already gathered, about 30 people in all. Ranch hands and their families, Margaret from the diner, Dr. Chen the veterinarian, a few neighboring ranchers who'd proven themselves allies, and Ruth, seated in the front row in a wheelchair, her eyes already misty with emotion. Tom stood under the arch in traditional Crow regalia, a beautiful blend of his heritage and his role as officiant. He smiled at Jake with warmth and encouragement. Then the music started, a simple guitar played by one of the hands who had a talent for it, and Will appeared. Jake's breath caught. Will wore clothes similar to Jake's own, but he'd added a leather jacket that had belonged to his father. He looked impossibly handsome, and the expression on his face, joy mixed with love mixed with hope, made Jake's chest tight with emotion. They met at the arch, and Tom began to speak. We're gathered here today to witness the joining of two lives, two hearts, two souls. Jake Thornton and Will Cameron have chosen to commit themselves to each other, to build a life together, to face whatever comes with unity and love. This ceremony might not be recognized by the state, but it is recognized by the people gathered here, by the land we stand on, and most importantly, by the hearts of these two men. Tom spoke about love and commitment, about the sacred nature of choosing a partner and honoring that choice. He incorporated elements from his own tradition, smudging sage, offering prayers to the four directions, alongside more conventional wedding elements. Then it was time for vows. Will went first, taking Jake's hands in his. Jake, when I met you, I was lost. I'd left my family, left everything I'd known, and I wasn't sure who I was supposed to be or where I belonged. Then I looked into your eyes and I knew. I belonged with you. These past 18 months have been the happiest of my life. You've taught me that strength doesn't mean never being afraid. It means being afraid and choosing courage anyway. You've shown me what it means to transform, to become the person you're meant to be. I promise to love you with everything I have, to support your dreams, to hold you through the hard times, and to build a life with you that honors us both. I choose you, Jake, today and always. Jake had to clear his throat several times before he could speak, tears streaming freely down his face. Will, I spent most of my life running from my past, from my truth, from the possibility of happiness. I'd convinced myself I didn't deserve love, that I was better off alone. Then you saw me, really saw me, and you didn't turn away. You held out your hand and you waited patiently while I found the courage to take it. You've given me everything I thought I could never have: a home, a purpose, a future. You've shown me that I'm worthy of love, that I can be brave, that I can build something lasting. I promise to choose you every single day for the rest of my life. I promise to be honest with you, to support your dreams, to love you through whatever challenges we face. You're my home, Will. You're my heart. And I'm yours completely and forever. They exchanged rings, the same simple silver bands from Will's proposal, and Tom pronounced them married by the power vested in him by love and community and the sacred bond between them. You may kiss your husband, Tom said with a wide smile. Jake and Will came together in a kiss that was tender and passionate and filled with promise. Around them, their friends and family erupted in applause and cheers. When they finally broke apart, both men were crying and laughing at the same time. The reception that followed was joyful and relaxed. Margaret had provided a feast, barbecue and all the fixings, salads, fresh bread, and a beautiful two-tier cake decorated with wildflowers made of frosting. There was music and dancing, toasts and laughter, and a sense of community that made Jake's heart swell. Ruth gave a toast that had everyone in tears, speaking about family and love and the courage it takes to live authentically. Tom offered a blessing in both English and Crow, asking for prosperity and joy for the newlyweds. Even Danny, usually shy, stood up and said a few words about how Jake and Will had shown him what real courage looked like. As the sun began to set, Jake and Will snuck away from the party for a few moments alone. They walked hand in hand to the creek, listening to the water babble over stones and the evening birds singing in the cottonwoods. "We did it," Will said. "We're married." "We're married," Jake repeated, trying the words out. "They felt good, right? I'm your husband." "And I'm yours," Will pulled him close. "How are you feeling?" "Like the luckiest man alive," Jake said honestly. "A year and a half ago I was alone and lonely and convinced I'd never have this. Now I have everything. It doesn't seem real." "It's real," Will promised. "And it's going to keep being real day after day, year after year. We're going to build an amazing life together, Jake. We're going to grow old on this ranch, working the land we love, surrounded by the family we've chosen. This is just the beginning." They kissed as the stars began to appear, and Jake felt a peace so profound it was almost overwhelming. He'd found his home. He'd found his love. He'd found himself. The lonely cowboy's Christmas had indeed taken an unexpected turn, and his heart would never be the same. But more than that, his life would never be the same. He was no longer alone, no longer running, no longer hiding. He was Jake Thornton Cameron now, married to the love of his life, co-owner of a thriving ranch, surrounded by people who loved him for exactly who he was. And that was worth every moment of fear he'd faced to get here. Summer arrived in full force, bringing long days of hard work and short nights of well-earned rest. Jake and Will fell into a rhythm as a married couple that felt as natural as breathing. They woke together, worked together, ate together, slept together. They were partners in every sense of the word, and the ranch thrived under their joint leadership. The horse training program continued to grow beyond their initial expectations. Word had spread through the Montana ranching community about the quality of horses coming out of the Double R, and they had a waiting list of clients wanting their horses trained. Jake worked with each animal individually, using patience and intuition to bring out the best in them, while Will handled the business side: contracts, scheduling, finances. "We're going to need to hire another trainer," Will said one evening in July as they went over the books. "We've got 15 horses here now, and another 10 scheduled to arrive in the next 2 months. You can't handle all of that alone." "I know," Jake said. "I've been thinking about it. There's a guy I worked with in Texas, name of Marcus Reed. Best horse trainer I ever met, and he's gay too. He might be interested in relocating if we can offer him a good situation." "Reach out to him," Will said. "If he's as good as you say and if you trust him, that's good enough for me." Marcus arrived in August, a tall black man in his 40s with gentle hands and an easy laugh. He and Jake fell back into their old working rhythm immediately, and Marcus seemed to fit into the ranch community as if he'd always been there. He moved into one of the spare rooms in the bunkhouse and quickly became friends with the other hands. "This is a good place you've got here," Marcus told Jake one day as they worked with a particularly stubborn mare. "Feels different from other ranches I've been on, more accepting, like people can be themselves." "That's what we're trying to build," Jake said. "A place where people are valued for their skills and their character, not judged for things that don't matter." "Well, you're succeeding. And speaking as someone who spent 20 years hiding who I am, working in places where I had to pretend I didn't exist, I appreciate what you and Will are doing here." The ranch continued to evolve. They expanded the training facilities, added new pastures, improved the breeding program. Ruth's health continued to decline slowly, but she remained sharp and engaged, offering advice and guidance while letting Jake and Will make the major decisions. In September, they received their first inquiry from a magazine wanting to do a feature on the ranch. The reporter, a woman from a regional publication called Montana Living, said she'd heard about their progressive approach to ranching and their successful horse training program. Jake's first instinct was to refuse. Publicity meant exposure, and exposure meant potential problems, but Will convinced him it was worth considering. "We're not hiding anymore," Will reminded him. "And maybe our story can help other people like us, people in rural areas who think they can never be themselves, who think they have to choose between their truth and their livelihood. Maybe we can show them there's another way." They agreed to the interview, and the reporter spent 3 days at the ranch in October. She interviewed Jake and Will, photographed the operation, talked to Ruth and the ranch hands. She was professional and respectful, and she seemed genuinely interested in their story. The article came out in December, just before the holidays. It was a beautiful piece, full of stunning photographs and thoughtful writing. The reporter had titled it "Breaking Barriers: How Two Cowboys Are Redefining Western Tradition," and she'd captured both the challenges they'd faced and the success they'd achieved. When Jake Thornton and Will Cameron decided to live openly as a gay couple in rural Montana, they knew they'd face resistance, the article began. What they didn't expect was how many people would support them, how much their authenticity would inspire others, and how their relationship would help transform not just their lives, but an entire ranch community. The article generated significant attention. They received letters from gay cowboys across the West, thanking them for their visibility and their courage. Several clients booked horse training specifically because of the article, saying they wanted to support a business that aligned with their values. Not all the attention was positive. There were some ugly letters too, filled with slurs and threats, but the positive overwhelmingly outweighed the negative. One letter in particular moved Jake to tears. It was from a 19-year-old ranch kid in Wyoming who wrote, "I've always known I was gay, but I thought that meant I could never be a rancher like my dad and granddad. I thought I'd have to choose between being myself and doing the work I love. Your article showed me I don't have to choose. Thank you for being visible. Thank you for being brave. You've given me hope for my future." "This is why it matters," Will said, reading over Jake's shoulder. "This is why we can't hide, even when it would be easier. Because there are kids out there who need to see that they can have a future, that they can be themselves, and still do the work they love." As their second Christmas together approached, Jake and Will faced new challenges. Ruth's health took a turn for the worse in November, and she was hospitalized for 2 weeks with heart failure. When she came home, it was clear she needed more care than she'd been receiving. They hired a part-time nurse and made modifications to the main house to make it easier for Ruth to get around. She hated being dependent on others, but she accepted the help with as much grace as she could muster. "I'm not ready to let go yet," she told Jake and Will one evening. "I want to see at least one more spring on this ranch. Want to see the calves born and the wildflowers bloom." "Then you'll see it," Will promised. "We'll make sure of it." They redoubled their efforts to make the ranch run smoothly, taking on more of the responsibilities Ruth had been handling. It was exhausting work on top of everything else they were managing, but they did it without complaint. In December, they received an unexpected visit from Will's older brother, David. He showed up at the ranch unannounced, driving a new truck and wearing expensive clothes that seemed out of place against the Montana landscape. "Will," he said when Will opened the door to their cabin, "we need to talk." Jake watched from the kitchen as the two brothers faced each other. There was tension in the air, old wounds and unspoken resentments. "What are you doing here, David?" Will asked, his voice carefully neutral. I don't know, to talk, to maybe apologize." David looked uncomfortable. "Can I come in?" Will hesitated, then stepped aside. David entered and nodded awkwardly at Jake. "You must be Jake. I'm David, Will's brother." "I know who you are," Jake said coolly. This was the man who'd driven Will away from his family home, who'd made it clear Will wasn't welcome because of who he loved. They sat in the living room, tension thick enough to cut with a knife. David fidgeted with his hat before finally speaking. "I saw the article in Montana Living. Mom sent it to me. She's been following your career, Will, keeping track of what you're doing." He paused. "I need to tell you something. Dad knew about you being gay. He knew before he died." Will went very still. "What?" "He asked me about it few months before he passed. Said he'd noticed things over the years, the way you never dated women, the way you were with your friend Derek. He asked me if I knew, and I told him. I confirmed it." David's voice was thick with emotion. "He didn't react the way I expected. He wasn't angry or disappointed. He said he just wanted you to be happy, wanted you to be able to be yourself. He was planning to talk to you about it, to tell you it was okay, but he died before he got the chance." Will's face was wet with tears. "Why didn't you tell me this before? Why did you let me leave thinking I was a disgrace to the family?" "Because I was an idiot," David said bluntly. "Because I was scared. Because I didn't understand and I let my own discomfort and ignorance hurt you. I'm sorry, Will. I'm so damn sorry. You deserved better from me, deserved better from our whole family." He pulled out a folded envelope. "This is from Mom. She wanted me to give it to you in person, wanted me to apologize face to face. She misses you, Will. We all do. And we want you to know that you're welcome home anytime, you and Jake both." Will took the envelope with shaking hands but didn't open it. "I have a home," he said quietly. "Here with Jake at this ranch. This is where I belong." "I know, I can see that. The article made it clear how happy you are, how much you've accomplished." David stood. "I'm not asking you to come back, not asking you to forgive me right away. I just wanted you to know the truth about Dad and to tell you I'm sorry. If you ever want to reconnect, the door's open. Mom would love to meet Jake and I'd like to get to know him too if you'll let me." After David left, Will broke down completely. Jake held him while he cried, mourning for the father who'd accepted him but died before he could say so, mourning for the years of unnecessary pain and distance from his family. "He knew," Will kept saying. "He knew and he was okay with it, and I never got to hear him say it." "But now you know," Jake said gently. "You know he loved you, accepted you, that's something." They opened the letter from Will's mother together. It was pages long, full of love and apologies and memories of Will as a child. She wrote about how proud she was of what he'd accomplished, how happy she was that he'd found love. She included photos, Will as a baby, as a child, as a teenager, and she ended with an invitation to visit any time with Jake. "We've lost too much time," she wrote. "I don't want to lose any more. Please come home, Will. Let me meet the man who makes you so happy. Let me be part of your life again." "What do you want to do?" Jake asked. Will was quiet for a long time. "I want to write back. I want to cautiously rebuild a relationship with my family, but I need you to understand this ranch is my home now. You're my home. I'm not going back to Wyoming to live no matter what." "I know," Jake said, "and I'll support whatever you decide about your family. If you want to visit them, we'll visit. If you want to invite them here, we'll invite them. Whatever you need." They spent Christmas Eve quietly that year, just the two of them. Ruth wasn't feeling well enough for a big gathering, so they kept it small, dinner with Ruth and her nurse, then back to their cabin for a quiet evening by the fire. "2 years ago I was alone," Jake said as they lay together on the couch, watching the flames dance. "I couldn't have imagined any of this, you, the ranch, being married, having a family." "Do you ever regret it?" Will asked. "Giving up the freedom of drifting, the safety of staying hidden?" "Never, not for a second." Jake kissed him. "This is everything I ever wanted, even when I didn't know I wanted it. You're everything." "You're everything to me too," Will said. "And next Christmas, maybe we'll have my family here. Maybe we'll keep building this community, this chosen family that accepts people for who they are." "Maybe," Jake agreed. "But right now this is enough. You and me together, that's all I need." They made love that night with a tenderness that spoke of deep commitment and trust. Afterward, as Will slept beside him, Jake lay awake and thought about how far he'd come. He'd transformed from a lonely drifter, always running, never staying, into a man with roots and purpose and love. A lonely cowboy's Christmas had indeed taken an unexpected turn, and his heart was forever changed. Spring came again, and with it, Ruth's last season on the ranch. She rallied enough to see the calves born and the wildflowers bloom as she'd wanted. She spent her days on the porch of the main house, wrapped in blankets, watching the ranch operations with satisfaction. "You boys have done well," she told Jake and Will one April afternoon. "Better than I ever could have hoped. This place has a real future now." "Because of you," Will said. "You built this, Ruth. We're just continuing your work." "No, you're building your own legacy, and it's a good one," she smiled. "I'm ready, ready to let go. I've had a good life, and I'm leaving this place in the best possible hands." Ruth died peacefully in her sleep on May 15th, surrounded by the ranch she loved. Her funeral was held in the meadow where Jake and Will had been married, and it seemed like half the county showed up to pay their respects. She'd touched so many lives with her kindness and integrity, and her loss was felt deeply. She left everything to Jake and Will just as she'd promised. The ranch was theirs now, completely. The land, the buildings, the cattle, the horses, the equipment, everything. It was overwhelming and bittersweet, gaining everything they'd worked for but losing the woman who'd made it possible. "She'd want us to keep going," Jake said as they stood at her grave site after everyone else had left. "Keep building, keep improving, keep creating a place where people can be themselves." "Then that's what we'll do," Will agreed. "We'll honor her memory by living well, by continuing her legacy of acceptance and integrity." They threw themselves into work, channeling their grief into productive action. They expanded the horse training program even further, built new facilities, improved the breeding program. Marcus became a full partner in the horse training side of the business, and they hired 2 more hands to help with the increased workload. In June, Will's mother visited for the first time. Maria Cameron was a small woman in her 60s with Will's blue eyes and a warm smile. She arrived with David and his wife. And Jake was nervous about meeting them. These were Will's family, and he wanted them to approve of him, to understand why Will had chosen to build his life here. His fears were quickly allayed. Maria hugged him tightly the moment they met, tears in her eyes. "Thank you," she said. "Thank you for loving my son, for giving him a home, for making him happy. I can see it in his eyes. He's content in a way he never was before." They spent a week at the ranch, and Jake watched Will reconnect with his family with cautious optimism. There were difficult conversations about the past, about the years of distance and misunderstanding, but there was also healing. By the time they left, Will was smiling more easily, some old pain finally beginning to fade. "They want us to come to Wyoming for Thanksgiving," Will said after they'd left. "David's wife is pregnant, and they want us to meet the baby when it's born. Would you be okay with that?" "Of course," Jake said. "They're your family, Will. I want you to have that relationship if it's what you want." Summer passed in a blur of work and heat, and the quiet satisfaction of a well-run operation. Their reputation continued to grow, and they were now considered one of the premier horse training facilities in the region. Jake found deep satisfaction in the work, in watching nervous or difficult horses transform under his patient guidance into confident, capable animals. In August, they received another unexpected visitor. A young man in his early 20s showed up at the ranch, nervous and uncertain, asking to speak with Jake and Will. "My name is Tyler," he said. "I read the article about you in Montana living. I'm from a small town in Idaho and I'm gay and I want to be a rancher, but I don't know how to make that work. I was hoping maybe you could give me some advice or maybe even a job. I'm willing to work hard, willing to learn. I just need a chance." Jake looked at Will, and they had one of those wordless conversations that came from knowing each other so deeply. They were thinking the same thing. They'd both been where Tyler was, uncertain and scared and desperately hopping for acceptance. "We can give you a job," Will said. "Starting position, but with room to grow if you prove yourself. We've got a spare room in the bunkhouse and we pay fair wages. If you're willing to work hard and learn, we're willing to teach you." Tyler's face lit up with hope and gratitude. "Really? You do that?" "We know what it's like," Jake said simply. "We know how hard it is to be young and gay and trying to find your place in this world, especially in rural communities. If we can help make it easier for you, that's what we're going to do." Tyler became part of the ranch family, and his presence reminded Jake and Will why their visibility mattered. He was eager to learn, worked tirelessly, and blossomed under their mentorship. And he wasn't the last. Over the months that followed, they received inquiries from other young LGBTQ people looking for safe places to work and live, and they hired several more. "We're becoming known for this," Will said one evening as they reviewed job applications. "For being a safe place, an accepting place. That's going to attract both support and opposition." "I know," Jake said, "but it's worth it. Look at Tyler, at how much he's grown in just a few months. Look at Marcus, at how much more relaxed he is here than he was at his previous jobs. We're giving people the chance to be themselves and do the work they love. That's important." Their second Christmas as a married couple was bigger and louder than the first. Will's family came to visit again, this time including David's new baby daughter. Tyler was there, along with Marcus and the other ranch hands and their families. Margaret closed her diner for the day to come out and cook for the celebration. Jake stood on the porch of the main house. His house now, he still had to remind himself, and watched the scene inside. People laughing, talking, sharing food and stories. A community they'd helped build, a family they'd helped create. Will came up behind him, wrapping his arms around Jake's waist. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "About how much has changed," Jake said. "About how different my life is from what I thought it would be. About how grateful I am." "Me too," Will said. "For all of it. The challenges, the triumphs, the quiet moments, and the big celebrations. All of it." They stood together, watching their chosen family celebrate, and Jake felt a contentment so deep it was almost overwhelming. He'd spent so many years believing he didn't deserve happiness, didn't deserve love, didn't deserve a home. And now he had all of those things and more. A lonely cowboy's Christmas had taken an unexpected turn, and his heart was never the same. But more than that, his life was transformed. He was no longer alone, no longer hiding, no longer running from his truth. He was home. 5 years after that first Christmas when Will had arrived at the Double R Ranch, Jake stood in the same meadow where they'd been married, watching the sunset paint the Montana sky in shades of gold and crimson. So much had changed, yet so much remained the same. The ranch had continued to thrive under their leadership. They'd added a training arena, expanded the breeding program, and built 3 more cabins to house their growing staff. The Double R was now known throughout the western states as both a premier horse training facility and as a progressive ranch that valued diversity and inclusion. They'd received awards and recognition from LGBTQ organizations, from ranching associations, from business groups. But what mattered most to Jake wasn't the external validation. It was the young people they'd helped, the community they'd built, the life they'd created together. Tyler, the nervous young man who'd shown up 5 years ago looking for a chance, was now their operations supervisor, managing a crew of 15 people and earning the respect of everyone he worked with. Marcus had become not just a business partner but a dear friend, and he'd recently started dating Dr. Chen, the veterinarian, after years of both being too shy to admit their mutual attraction. Several other LGBTQ ranch workers had found their way to the Double R over the years, and while Jake and Will never advertised themselves as running a gay ranch, they were known as a safe and welcoming place. They employed people based on skill and character, and they'd built a crew that was diverse in every sense of the word. Will's relationship with his family had continued to heal and grow. They visited Wyoming regularly, and Maria and David had become fixtures at the ranch during holidays and major events. Jake had even developed a warm relationship with his brother-in-law and had become a favorite uncle to David's daughter, Emma, now 5 years old. The article in Montana Living had been followed by others, in regional publications, national magazines, even a segment on a cable news show about changing attitudes in rural America. Jake had never fully comfortable with the publicity, but he understood its importance. Every time they shared their story, they received letters from people it had helped, kids who felt less alone, families learning to accept their LGBTQ children, rural communities becoming more inclusive. They'd faced challenges, certainly. There had been vandalism once, ugly words spray-painted on their barn. There had been a few clients who'd canceled contracts when they learned about Jake and Will's relationship. There had been awkward moments in town, cold shoulders from people who didn't approve. But the support had vastly outweighed the opposition. The Montana ranching community, often stereotyped as backward and intolerant, had largely embraced them. Other ranchers sought their advice on everything from horse training to sustainable grazing practices. They'd been invited to speak at industry conferences about both their operational innovations and their approach to building an inclusive workplace. Now, standing in the meadow as evening fell, Jake thought about the journey that had brought him here. He was 41 now, with silver threads beginning to show in his dark hair and lines at the corners of his eyes. Will was 38, still heartbreakingly handsome, still the person Jake wanted to see first thing every morning and last thing every night. "There you are," Will said, appearing from the direction of the barn. "Been looking for you. Everything okay?" "Everything's perfect," Jake said honestly. "I was just thinking." "Dangerous pastime," Will teased, coming to stand beside him. "What about?" "About that first Christmas. About how lonely I was, how convinced I was that I'd always be alone. About how you changed everything." Jake turned to face him. "About how grateful I am for every day we've had together." "Even the hard days?" Will asked with a slight smile. "Especially the hard days, because we faced them together and we came out stronger." Jake took Will's hand, feeling the familiar calluses, the warmth of his skin. "I love you, Will. More now than I did 5 years ago, more than I did yesterday, more than I even thought possible." "I love you too," Will said. "And I'm grateful for every day as well, for the chance to build this life with you, for the opportunity to create something meaningful, for the privilege of being your husband." They kissed as the last light faded from the sky and the stars began to appear. After all these years, Jake still felt that spark, that connection, that sense of coming home every time Will touched him. "Come on," Will said, tugging his hand. "Marcus and Dr. Chen, Sarah, invited us over for dinner. They have some news they want to share." "Think they're finally getting engaged?" Jake asked as they walked hand in hand back toward the ranch buildings. "I'd bet money on it. Marcus has been fidgeting like a nervous colt all week." They were right. Marcus and Sarah announced their engagement over dinner, and the evening turned into an impromptu celebration. They toasted the happy couple with good wine, shared stories and laughter, and Jake found himself thinking again about family, about how it wasn't defined by blood, but by choice and love and commitment. Later that night, back in their cabin, the one they'd shared for 7 years now, the one that had become truly theirs, filled with their memories and their life together, Jake and Will lay in bed, wrapped in each other's arms. "Do you ever miss it?" Will asked quietly. "The freedom of drifting, of not being tied down." Jake had been asked this before, and his answer had never changed. "Never, not for a single moment. I thought I wanted freedom, but what I really wanted was safety. I thought running was freedom, but it was really just another kind of prison, one I'd built for myself." He kissed Will's shoulder. "This is freedom, being able to be myself completely, being loved for who I am, having a home and a purpose and a future. This is what I always wanted, even when I didn't know it." "Good," Will said, "because I can't imagine my life without you. You're my best friend, my partner, my home, you're everything." They drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, and Jake's last thought before sleep claimed him was simple. He was happy. Truly, deeply, completely happy. Epilogue: A New Beginning. 10 years after that first Christmas, Jake woke to the sound of children's laughter. He lay still for a moment, orienting himself, then smiled as he remembered. Tyler and his husband Alex were visiting with their adopted son, and Emma was here with David and his family. The ranch was full of life and noise and joy. He got out of bed carefully, not wanting to wake Will, and padded to the window. Outside, the December sun was just rising, painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. The ranch looked beautiful, peaceful, perfect. So much had changed in a decade. They'd added more land, more facilities, more programs. They ran youth camps in the summer now,